After Hours is absolutely amazing and incredibly underrated. Released in 1985, directed by Martin Scorsese. This is just not only my favorite Martin Scorsese film, but I think it's definitely now in my top 5. And what's funny is, like, I saw this movie about a year ago. I'd never heard about it until I came across it on Amazon Prime one night. And, I just had intentions to watch maybe, like 5-10 minutes of it, but I ended up watching the whole thing. And what's great is that it's not very long compared to most of Martin Scorsese's films. I think it has a runtime of about an hour and 34, hour and 40 minutes. So it's not like most of Scorsese's other films that are also more violent too. I mean, like his hits, Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Casino, so forth. So the film is about a guy named Paul Hackett, played by Griffin Dunne, who's very well known from American Werewolf in London, as basically a word processor, so it seems like in the beginning it shows that he's kind of living this like boring, mundane life, and he seems like a little bit of a social outcast. So he goes home after work one night and he's just kind of hanging out in his apartment, and he can't really figure out what to do. And I get it. We've all had those nights where you get home from work and you're like, I'm kind of sick of just doing the same old shit. I think I want to just like break the monotony and, like try and have an adventure, something stupid along the lines of that. So he ends up going to this cafe where he's reading a book, which, by the way, reading a book in public, I don't know. I mean, like, nothing against reading. I can just never read a book in public because I would just be afraid of something like this happening where, Rosanna Arquette, this girl that ends up talking to Paul Hackett's character. I mean, like, yeah, sure, it's like, oh, this beautiful girl's talking to me because I'm reading this book. Like, oh, maybe something great's gonna happen. But it's funny, basically, Paul Hackett, like a main character in the movie, like, his whole night is just completely fucked, all because he just wants to try and hook up with this girl. This movie just has such a great blend of different genres. I mean, you got your dark comedy, you have a little bit of like a thriller aspect to it, like a little bit of suspense as well. This movie to me just seems like a very like surreal, like vivid nightmare type of setting, because it's like, he thinks he's gonna have like one of the greatest nights of his life, going on this date or meeting up with, Rosanna Arquette's character. But it's just like one thing after another goes wrong, and then it starts off by like he's taking a cab to go see Rosanna Arquette's character, Marcy is her name, and then he's like reaches for his money to pay, and he's very low on money, like he only has like a $20 bill on him, and the money flies out the window, and so he gets dropped like in the middle of like Soho, New York. So I think he's like in some part of like Manhattan. So he finally makes his way to go see this, Marcy girl. And, in his head, he's probably thinking like, oh, this is going to be amazing. We're going to have a great night. I might get laid. But, of course, none of that happens. And it's just, like, random, too. Like, he shows up to her apartment or this loft where she's living. And her roommate is this, like, weird, strange, like, artsy type person named Kiki. Which, I mean, she seems pretty cool, but it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of random how she kind of just comes out of nowhere. But it's cool because it doesn't break up the flow of the movie. It just keeps things going right along, and where there's just no dull parts. Like, that's what's cool about this movie. You just never know what's going to happen. Like, everything that happens is just kind of like, what the hell? Like, wow, I was not expecting that. You never know what to expect in this film. Yeah, I feel bad for Paul Hackett's character, too, because it's like, he seems like such a nice guy and like an intellectual type of person, like pretty humble. But it's like, the guy does kind of look like the bargain bin at Goodwill that someone farted in repeatedly. I do love a good movie that takes place over the course of just, one night or day, very much, like Dazed and Confused or, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, The Breakfast Club, and just Clerks, to name a few of them. So basically, as the night goes on a little bit, after he starts hanging out with Rosanna Arquette's character, he pretty much starts to realize, like, okay, yeah, this chick's fucking insane. I need to get the hell out of here. This is not at all how I imagined things to go. And it's just funny. He decides to snap when they finally go into Marcy's room. And, he's like, how about those joints now? And, like, they're about to start smoking, but he can tell that it's just, absolute shit weed. Thank God we live in the modern era where you can just go to a dispensary and get it. And then, so yeah, he just figures, like, you know what, fuck this, I'm out of here, this chick's a nut bar, and I gotta fucking work tomorrow. Because that's what's crazy, it's like, he works, like, this normal day job, like, I believe it's supposed to be, like, a 9-to-5 type job, you know, just as a word processor. And when he meets up with her, it's already pretty late, especially if you have to wake up early in the morning, you know, it's like, after midnight or close to 2 a.m., you know, like, when they were, like, still hanging out, or at some point, like, when they're at, like, a cafe. So once he decides to hightail it basically away from Marcy's apartment, he makes his way into a bar called Terminal, which this is my favorite, like one of my favorite parts of the movie. Just amazing, you know, when he walks into this bar, it's just such beautiful overall ambiance, you know, late night dive bar. I love a good dive bar.
What'll it be? I don't want anything. I just want to sit here.
Howard Shore also composed the music for this movie, and what's crazy is he actually also did the music for the Lord of the Rings trilogy, too. So, oh yeah, that's right. I just realized that I skipped the part before he goes into the Terminal bar. He goes in there because, you know, he's trying to wait out the rain because he goes to the subway station to, you know, finally get the hell out of there and go home because he wants to get some sleep. And they raised the fare from $1 to $1.50, and mind you, he only has 97 cents after the $20 bill flew out of the window. So I mean, he's basically fucked. He's screwed. It's just crazy that all the trouble he goes through in this movie, and like he could have just made it home 1 hour and 47 minutes. I mean, it would suck. That's a fucking long walk, and I've been there myself, but whatever. I guess, you know, you wouldn't have this great movie if you did. It's just funny because in the subway station when he leaves after he tries to like jump the booth, like when he's off camera, you can hear the security cop say like, "Oh, yeah, it must be the full moon tonight." So it's like that was clearly definitely had to be have been a reference to American Werewolf in London. So when he finally makes his way into Terminal Bar, you know, and you got that great music playing, you have some, you know, not really cameo appearances, but some appearances by some very great actors, in my opinion, like highly underrated too. I mean, you got Terri Garr for one, which, oh my god, she is a goddess. You know, like a lot of people might know her from... Well, that's the thing. I feel like she's not very well known. I mean, like, some of the movies that come off the top of my head she was on, Mom and Dad Save the World, like in the 80s, which I thought that was a pretty funny movie. She also played the stepmother on Dumb and Dumber. I mean, like, that's kind of, from what I recall, it's like one of the first movies I ever saw her in. And then she makes a cameo on Ghost World as, like, Enid's dad's like annoying girlfriend, or like the girlfriend that she can't stand. And then of course, as the bartender, Tom the bartender, which by the way, he's the only character in this movie that seems to have any amount of sanity, played by John Hurt, otherwise mainly known as Kevin McAllister's father, Peter McAllister. That'd be funny. It's like, that's like it says on his grave, I played Kevin McAllister's dad. I mean, rest in peace to John Hurt, but he really was a great actor. It's just funny though, because like right after he meets, or when he's in the bar and he's like making small talk with Tom the bartender, played by John Hurt, you know, he's expressing his like frustrations, like, I can't believe it, you know, it's like, they raised it, I only have 97 cents, and he's like, oh, well, Christ, I'll give you the money.
Christ, I'll give you the money. Really? Jesus. I
So he thinks he's pretty much essentially saved right there. And then so John Hurt tries to get the money out of the register, but he doesn't have his key. He left his key in his apartment, so it's like, this guy is just getting fucked over left and right. I mean, he can't win. He's having the worst night of his life. I was really happy to read the fact that Martin Scorsese speaks very highly and fondly of this movie. Like, I guess, like, him directing this movie just got him out of, like, some director's melees that he was dealing with, you know, in the, like, early to mid-'80s. Because, I mean, like I said earlier, you know, it is a little bit different from most of his films, you know, it's not so violent and gruesome, and, you know, it's not involving the mob, or... Yeah, the original cut of the movie was actually 45 minutes longer, but I'm really glad, you know, they stuck with the length that it is. Because it's like, I feel like if it just went on any longer, it just would have, like, kind of ruined it, and it would have just started to drag. Like, the movie ended when I was ready for it to end, despite how much I love this movie. And I don't want to say what happens in the end, but oh my god. The ending is just brutal. And it's just, I think, one of my favorite parts too, like, besides, like, you know, him going into the bar and talking to the bartender, is definitely towards the end when he just starts venting about, like, this horrible night that he's had to this guy, and it's funny because it just shows him standing in the guy's apartment. There's like a brick wall background, and to me it's like what makes it funny to me is it just seems like he's doing like improvisational stand-up.
I'm nice about it too. Let me use the phone, that was it. Just use it, pick it up and put it down, pick it up and put it down. So now she's the one in the Mr. Soft.
Guy's just sitting there like watching him, just like what the hell's going on with this guy? And like, but the guy is like this gay dude that's like, you know, hasn't came out yet, and like he thinks that like Paul's a prostitute or something. There's just so many fun characters in this movie too, and what's crazy, and I almost forgot about this, Catherine O'Hara appears in the movie briefly, and get this, like Catherine O'Hara and John Hurt actually appear together very briefly, you know, towards the end of the movie. So it's kind of crazy. It's like, so in my world, I create the fictional world of like, oh, maybe this is how they met. You know, this is before Peter McAllister became like a millionaire working for like Goldman Sachs or doing investment banking, and this is, you know, Kate McAllister before she became like a successful fashion designer. I mean, I know that they're fictional characters, you know, blah, 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 but hey, you know, just trying to spice it up a bit, okay? Oh yeah, and by the way, yeah, Cheech and Chong make an appearance in this movie too. I almost forgot about that. Yeah, they're pretty funny. They play the burglars. They're committing burglars, in which Paul keeps getting blamed for towards the end and ends up having like this giant mob after him. So everyone's trying to kill him as he's trying to get home, which is not working out. And it's a, man, I've been there where you're trying to get home and it's just becoming like an impossible task. I mean, like I remember I was living in Portland, Oregon it was about 8 years ago. This had to have been like January 2014, and there was like a vicious, brutal ice storm, snowstorm. I was working in like the food service industry at the time, which is fucking terrible. I don't recommend it to anyone, but you know, I was younger at the time and they'll fucking hire anyone because no one wants to work in the food service industry. It fucking blows and doesn't pay shit. So getting to work was fine. Like I had to take the bus because the roads were too icy. I didn't want to try and drive my car and get fucked over by crashing it. And, you know, it was 20 miles round trip. So, like, I got off work. This was like 8 o'clock at night, and the weather was just brutal. And so, you know, like, everyone thought, oh, there's just going to be delays with the buses. But it turns out all the bus lines got canceled, and I had no fucking way to get home. So, I mean, like, I just, you know, there was, like, I was trying to get a cab, and this is, like, it might have been, actually, you know what, I think a Lyft did exist at this time, but I don't even think any Lyfts were out, and I didn't even have a phone good enough. I still had like a piece of shit, like crappy Cricket phone or whatever. So I ended up just, you know, just cutting my losses, and I walked home like 10.5 miles in the fucking ice and snow. I mean, thank God I had like a big, nice, you know, comfortable, like warm winter coat and a beanie and everything, gloves. So that was fine. I wasn't cold, but man, I guess the point I'm getting at is that I definitely called in sick to work the next day. And as soon as I saw this mini mart when I was like halfway home, I went in there and I bought a 12-pack of beer and I drank pretty much all of them. And once I got home and started drinking, I actually felt great. It was a good time, you know. There was a certain amount of freedom that like came over me. Realizing you just get to that point of fuck it. I feel like Paul should have just gotten to that level of fuck it when he got to that point of trying to get home. You know, like maybe he should have just like, I don't know, I'm sure if he could have just like hung out with Tom the bartender a little bit more at the terminal bar, that like maybe he could have gotten some free drinks out of it. He should have just called in sick too, but I don't want to like ruin the ending, but fuck it, I will. Who gives a shit? Basically, at the end of the movie, after I said I wasn't gonna like spoil the ending, he ends up falling out of Cheech and Chong's like van that they used to like store all the shit that they've stolen from like houses and apartments, like because he gets stuck in the van like being like in a paper mache statue. So he falls out, and when he gets up from falling out of the van, he's at work. And prior to that, he's trying to make all these phone calls and everything, but he's trying to like call friends to like get a place to crash for the night. But he should have just fucking called in sick. That's all he had to do. I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, like, maybe, he didn't strike me as the type of person that was normally irresponsible or anything, and like maybe called in sick too much prior, but he should have definitely called in sick, and that's what I did when I had trouble getting home one night, just like Paul Hackett. But yeah, you can't go wrong checking out After Hours. It's absolutely amazing. It's definitely, like I said, it's now in my top 5 after rewatching it last night. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still love some of the Scorsese classics. I mean, like, I love Taxi Driver, I love Goodfellas, I absolutely love Casino. Color Money is also amazing. I'm going to be reviewing that in a few months. But check out After Hours. This is my #1 favorite Scorsese film by a long shot. Check it out.